I would like now to ask the President of the Agricultural Commission of the House of the Chamber of Deputies, Filippo Gallinella, to come on stage. Let's see if we can fix the technical problem with the scordamaglia, and then we will complete the last panel. Let's sanitize the microphone for guest. Well, I think that we have given a very clear picture of the agri-food sector as a whole and the proposal that Farming for Future represents. We started with this question: green possible, new energy for new markets. We were asking ourselves if a platform like Farming for Future could provide a suitable answer to the challenges ahead, to the challenges of energy transition, to the challenges of the green transition, because the idea of a circular economy, the idea of the circularity of economy, of farming, of industry, could have a concrete starting point. Our friends from Biogas Italy, from the Italian Biogas Consortium, started from Biogas Done Right, and then developed this platform of these 10 actions, Farming for Future. What about Mr. Scordamaglia? Do we have him? We don't have him, unfortunately. So, over to you. I think you've heard everything that was said by the protagonists of this sector, by the other institutional guests.
Quindi ci dica qual è la sua visione e quali sono.
So share with us your vision and what are the first answers you think you can give us. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And allow me to correct you. Agriculture was always circular, at least in Italy. But now we have to go a step further. I think this is possible, and politics will have the task of supporting this process, this pathway, which is not an easy one to tread on. Without profitability, you cannot do anything. But we have to consider things from the perspective that we have to associate Made in Italy with sustainability, because world-level competition is based on this. And you have spoken about the battle that the government and the parliament are waging against fake information given by the Nutri-Score, but we will have environmental labeling. We have to be ready. So the companies, the farms, those that are in contact with the international sector, they have done a lot already for sustainability and circular economy, recovery of waste, recovery of energy, measuring emissions, to calculate greenhouse gases, in order to give consumers information, to tell them, well, look, my product is not just made in Italy, it's produced in an ethical way, in the right way. It also has some important environmental features. This is important, and your work, in other words, producing biogas by making use of agricultural waste today, and then we can speak about many other things, but still is essential for circularity to give an income to farmers. So the idea of producing biomethane or other biomass-related energy, renewable energy, allows us to reach those goals that are still far from being reached today. And earlier, our friends from the farming sector asked of us to be clearer at the regulatory level. But in the past few months, the emergency decrees because of COVID, and then because some decrees were passed in order to solve some problems, we can say we have renewed, for instance, incentives in connection to biogas and biomethane, connecting to the grid, the supply of materials from one company to another. In other words, many things were regulated thanks to our colleagues from the different commissions. We have worked on these topics. So I think it's essential to make everybody known, perhaps those who are not familiar with parliamentary activities, the fact that we have been focusing on these topics greatly. Then there are many other aspects we are working on chemical fertilizers, and so we are working extensively. They are worried about vulnerable areas, so we have to see where this nitrogen comes from. In other words, there is a lot of work being done on these topics. The NRRP sets aside some 2 billion euros for reconversion purposes. Now, of course, there is a lot of work behind this in terms of how to do that, how to write the calls for proposals. These amounts have to be spent by 2026. We cannot waste any more time. We will start with projects that have already been approved, and also biomethane fueled vehicles. 500 million is set aside. Next year we should have the call for proposal for the renewal of the vehicle fleets. Water is another aspect. We have to use better manage water, use also wastewater. This money seems a lot, but then if we compare this to our public debt, it's really a fraction. But we have to reason about the fact that these incentives must be adjusted and focused in order to promote this country's growth. Because if this country grows, there is development, there is income, there is innovation. It would be good to bring 5G on the fields if we want digitization. Everything is included in this beautiful dream plan that was developed, revised by the parliament. Now, to put it into practice with the local administration, it's a bit more complicated, but we're trying to do that because, of course, there is a centralized state, the various local bodies. There is a lot of intention. The exchange, the cooperation with the territory, with the firms, with the local bodies. Of course, they have had to grapple with many problems, so they know how things stand. So we have to identify critical issues, for instance, in the field of good transportation. We have to understand how to be more competitive. In the field of wine, there is a committee that is responsible for studying the sustainability of the sector. In the case of animal husbandry, we are studying it. We are including the topic of animal wellness. The committee is studying all these things, but this transition has to go little by little. Of course, the pandemic has uncovered all those big issues that existed today. There are inflationary phenomena. Inflation is okay if it's controlled, but today inflationary phenomena, which are quite sizable, lead to the increase of the cost of raw materials. And if we can become a bit more independent, we cannot be fully independent, but if we can depend less on fluctuations, this is important because a word in this plan is resilience. So this in the future will allow us to be less affected by shocks. So today we've got a pandemic. In the future there may be a crisis, or there may be a climate change crisis in a supplier country, or a coup. Of course, nobody wants to be left behind, so we always have to think of a B plan or a C plan. This is our commitment. This is what we would like to do. And along this path, attention, focus on the environment is essential, considering, though, that if we look at emissions, the European Union is going to be responsible for some 10% of world emission. Italy maybe 1%. If we switch Italy off, nothing is going to change in climate. But we still have to set the example and promote other countries' take up of these roadmap. So there have been many studies published on several important topics. Feeding the world, a world in which population is growing, is another essential element. It's a very big challenge, of course, not just to fight against hunger, but another topic that we do not hear much about is malnutrition. So, for farming, for agriculture too, the idea of these innovative technologies that allow us to reach certain goals. We heard about the strategy from to fork that seemed to be worrying for some. Then there is the NBT element that we need to consider. So without new things, without research, without the NBT, can we reach these goals, maintaining productivity? Because if the country grows and then production decreases by 50%, the growth, the problem of hunger will become much bigger. So we have to be careful whatever we do, but we have to be convinced about what we are doing. All the things that we have been talking about, this expertise is something that we have to make available. The resources are needed to make that leap forward that we couldn't make so far. But all crises make you smarter. Unfortunately, when you are well, you never think you can, be in a difficult situation. And to change, you do need crises such as this. Unfortunately, this is what happens. Crises make people realize that we have to do something more, and we are there. Thank you, Honourable Member of Parliament. We can say that numerically Europe counts for less, but qualitatively it can be really at the forefront, a pioneer in fighting against climate change. Glasgow's COP26 that is about to start, or the pre-COP is going to start next week in Milan. We can really be the protagonists in this, and our products can play a leading role if they come from a chain that is more sustainable, that is greener in many respects. So I will ask you the same question with which we started today. A session: green possible? Is this possible? Yes. And perhaps people in the audience know, but there is a study carried out by the environmental ministry, Made Green Italy. Some sectors, including the food sector, following a pathway to be able to use this tool, which makes use of the 16 indicators of sustainability of the European Union with a certain calculation. I've seen that Gallinella is working on this, and I already commended its president, because there is a lot of goodwill in this going in this direction. So we've got the regulatory tool that allows us to go in this direction. Everything can be improved, of course. We've done this about meat, so we will do. We've done this about milk. We will do it on milk, and then it's going to be the turn of oil. So this is something that Italy has, this creativity, and in the occasion of international meetings, we can, bring to the forefront what we have been doing. Of course, communication on these topics is always a bit complicated, but be aware that we do have some regulatory tools that for a long time have been going in this direction. The difficulty that we encounter is then putting them into practice for many reasons, including 8,000 municipalities, different administrations, and the simplification that has to accompany this process of recovery and resilience will make things easier for us, I'm sure. I'm optimistic. So green possible, yes, but also green pass, since this is another one of the topics that are being discussed at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Gallinella. Thank you. Let us thank the President of the Commission, Agriculture at the Chamber of Deputies, and let us go.